Ellis Pinsky was a regular suburban teenager until he found his way into the underworld of internet hackers. In his first interview, he details the crime that nearly ruined his life. The break-in happened around 4 a.m. on a leafy street in the otherwise sleepy and sleeping village of Irvington, New York. 4 men wearing ski masks and gloves, armed with knives, rope, brass knuckles, and a fake 9mm, crept around the back of the large suburban home, their ghostly forms captured by its security camera footage. As would later be alleged in court proceedings, the rope was intended to tie up the family. The knife was to torture them until the oldest son told them what they wanted to know. The gun was for show. A fake gun can evoke the same amount of fear as a real one but leads to lesser charges. These men knew what they were doing. And they apparently knew exactly what they wanted to find. A bedroom community 20 miles up the Hudson River from New York City, Irvington's whole point is to be a place of calm, not calamity, a place where white-collar families can disperse themselves sparsely in well-appointed homes with river vistas and 2-car garages. There are good public schools. There is a historic main street that runs up from the water, a parade of American flags suspended from buildings that look as though they were plucked from a Christmas village. The town is named for former resident Washington Irving, whose Rip Van Winkle is cast in bronze, forever waking from his long slumber in the yard beside Town Hall. Oblivious to the soccer moms in Lululemon and the teenagers in Ivy League sweatshirts who saunter by throughout the day. Beyond Main Street, tended lawns extend up into the hills, deliberately at a peaceful remove from the crime and grime of urban life. And yet, Ellis Pinsky had feared that something dangerous and violent was headed toward Irvington. He'd feared it for weeks now. He'd sat in his 12th grade math class and pondered the various means by which calamity might befall him, how it would arrive, what form it would take, what he might do to defend himself. His answer to that last concern was a shotgun, which he had stored in a drawer by his bed, near the chess trophies he'd won when he was younger, when the games he played stuck to their borders. At Blue Line Shooting Sports a couple of towns over, his slender, studious form had drawn looks from the rougher types who spent their afternoons aiming assault weapons at targets next to a store full of tactical supplies. He ignored the stares, drawn the shotgun up to his smooth, handsome face under its shock of black hair, trained his brown eyes on a point in the distance, and pulled the trigger. The 15-year-old boy who stole $24 million in cryptocurrency. Ellis Pinsky tells his story but nobody knows whether to believe him. Clyde Barrow first struck at age 16. He borrowed a used car from a dealership outside of Dallas and forgot to return it. Alphonse Al Capone participated in the robbery of a Brooklyn store at 19, his first crime, which secured him the meager amount of just over $10. Precocious criminals? Perhaps, but wait until you read this. At just 15 years old, Ellis Pinsky, a teenager of Russian descent, who was raised in a middle-class home in Irvington, New York, stole the equivalent of $24 million in cryptocurrency. It was not his first cybercrime, but it was his largest and most profitable one. He did it on the afternoon of January 7, 2018. It was a bloodless coup, a treacherous and youthfully audacious crime. The technological equivalent of tunneling through a vault and breaking into a maximum security safe. Pinsky thinks it was easy and a lot of fun. But he adds that he wishes he hadn't done it because it has made life for him and his family hell. 2 years after his crime, in May 2020, the young New Yorker almost died. In the wee hours of the morning, 4 intruders broke into the home he shared with his mother, stepfather and 3 younger siblings. They wore ski masks and thick overcoats, and wielded brass knuckles, butcher's knives and a fake 9mm pistol. Their presence was caught on security cameras and a broken window set off the burglar alarm. Pinsky had taken precautions. For months, he'd assumed that something like this would happen, so he bought a shotgun on the black market. With the help of his mother, he confronted the 2 assailants who remained upstairs. When they fled, he cornered the 2 who had gone into the basement and he called the police. Pinsky tells the story as if it were a Tarantino movie, but he also acknowledges that he knew that he was risking his life. The 2 burglars who were arrested were Dominic Pineda and Sean Morgan, 21-year-old petty thieves who had recently arrived from Virginia. Pinsky thinks he knows who sent them, although he is careful not to say. And he has no doubt what they were looking for, the remaining loot, money that by then, he says, he no longer had. A Thief's Diary. Alex Morris, the editor of Rolling Stone magazine, was the first to get an in-depth interview with Ellis Pinsky, the cyber thief whom the New York press has nicknamed Baby Al Capone. The interview was published on July 8, and it attests to how much more sophisticated and unusual cybercrime has become in recent years. Morris says that it took him several weeks to gain Pinsky's trust. Ultimately, Pinsky agreed to tell him the whole truth, on the condition that the journalist not leave out any important details in his article. "I want the world to know my side of the story, and it is not simple. You have to tell it well." Pinsky's story is that of a perfectly normal child. He's the son of migrants from the former Soviet Union. The family lived in New York City until they moved to Irvington, a sleepy commuter town on the Hudson River, when Ellis was 11 years old. In his new suburban residence, the chubby and somewhat shy, but by no means socially awkward, boy grew fond of online video games such as Counter-Strike and Call of Duty. He then started spending time with a young community of would-be hackers that hang out in gamer environments. Veteran hackers who had noticed his progress began to share what they knew with him in exchange for him performing modest, and not always legal, tasks for them. Pinsky engaged in acts of what is referred to as social engineering, that is, extracting passwords or professional credentials from workers at social networks or from key computer services in order to access other people's computers. For instance, someone boasts in an online chat that he works as a trainee programmer at Twitter or Microsoft and can access a series of user accounts or cell phones. You show interest, gain his trust, and get him to tell you what he can actually do or how it is done. Pinsky proved to be a natural at this task, but he was interested in true knowledge and true power. At 15, this brilliant self-taught individual believed he was able to hack any account and any device. He had taken social engineering to a new level, creating a network of collaborators and accomplices whom he paid small amounts to help him with his increasingly complex misdeeds. The perfect heist? Then Baby Al Capone entered the cybercrime big leagues. One day, a guy named Harry contacted Ellis to tell him that someone he knew from the OG users online community, which is very popular among hackers, had offered to sell access to users' passwords for a service that buys and sells cryptocurrency. Harry and Ellis identified a potential victim from the client database, Michael Turpin, a businessman in his 60s who was on the verge of becoming a billionaire. With the help of an anonymous informer, they gained control of Turpin's SIM card. They could even check his crypto asset portfolio balances. Doing so confirmed that the billionaire had $900 million in Ethereum cryptocurrency. Turpin denies that claim, but they could not access the money. Looking for access to less secure asset portfolios, they found a company called Counterparty where Turpin had more than 3 million triggers, an emerging cryptocurrency that Pinsky had never even heard of. They thought the triggers would be worth just a few $1,000s, but simply looking at the virtual currency price showed that they were actually worth $24 million. After hacking Turpin's 12-word password, they took control of his portfolio. At that point, Pinsky made the rookie mistake that would later allow Turpin to track him down. He transferred some of the cryptocurrency to his own account to make sure it was real money. As soon as Pinsky confirmed that his balance reflected the new deposit, he and Harry mobilized their network of accomplices. They began to make dozens of transactions to help them launder the money by exchanging it for bitcoins and transferring it through different servers before depositing it into a new account. He went to bed early because he had gym class the next day. What followed is an even more unlikely and twisted story. It took Pinsky several weeks to realize that he had just become the richest teenager in New York State and that the FBI could bust through his front door at any moment. He was not aware that he had stolen a fortune, only that he had pulled a childish prank, the real dimensions of which he did not fully appreciate. Pinsky says that he barely touched the money, but he does concede that he bought a Patek Philippe watch for $50,000, which he paid for in Bitcoin, and spent another $900 on flights from Chicago to New York for his entire family. "I have $100 million. As he tells it, Ellis went to the meeting with a friend, convinced that he was heading into the lion's den and expecting that Truglia was going to break his legs. Pinsky also says that he returned to Irvington at dawn in an Uber feeling like the protagonist of a delirious movie farce, a kind of juvenile version of The Wolf of Wall Street. Ellis found himself a good lawyer, pleaded guilty to embezzlement and, as a show of good faith, returned 562 bitcoins, the Patek watch, and just under $100,000 in cash, which he had been keeping in a piggy bank under his bed. After all, at the time of the events he was only 15 years old, and a cybercriminal is not an armed robber. Currently, Pinsky is studying computer science and economics at a college near his mother's house. In 2021, he spent a semester studying abroad in Florence. Ellis is talented and driven. Moreover, his past is not an obstacle in the interconnected fields where he intends to make his living, technology and business. It's actually quite the opposite. Morris sees Pinsky as consumed by the premature melancholy of someone who has gone through too much too soon. Cryptocurrencies, and their rampant and wild volatility, have not only brought us a generation of newfangled speculators, but also criminals as unlikely as Ellis Pinsky.